This is Duke University.
Good afternoon, Fuqua community. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for taking time this afternoon to join us today to welcome Mr. Walter Robb, co-CEO of Whole Foods Market, and several members of his leadership team. Mr. Robb joined Whole Foods as store manager in California in 1991, an exciting time. Soon thereafter, in 1993, Whole Foods went public on NASDAQ. Walter soon became president of the Northern Pacific region, where he grew the region from 2 to 17 stores. From there, Walter quickly worked his way up through the ranks to become co-president in 2004. The following year, 2005, Whole Foods joined the Fortune 500. Co-CEO since 2010, Mr. Robb now oversees a company that has almost 70,000 employees and 350 stores across the US, Canada, and the United Kingdom. The vast majority of us here today are very familiar with Whole Foods. In fact, if you were to go after class on any evening to the store over on Broad Street, it's kind of a mini Fuqua reunion. You see a lot of people there. That being said, did you also know Whole Foods is a system of decentralized buying? There is no singular professional supply chain, but rather there are products that are unique to each region, thus employing local businesses. In 2007, Whole Foods launched the Whole Trade Guarantee, a purchasing initiative focused on social and ethics responsibility concerning products in the stores. The criteria includes factors such as fair prices for crops, environmentally sound labor practices, better wages and conditions for workers, and premium product quality. As corporate leader, Walter has said, if I put our mission in simple terms, it would be, number 1, to change the way the world eats, and number 2, to create a workplace based on love and respect. Without our employees, we're just 4 walls and a lot of food. To deliver on those words, the data speaks for itself. Whole Foods has been included in Fortune magazine's annual list of the 100 best companies to work for every single year since the list began. We so appreciate Walter being here with us today and look forward to hearing his story about being a leader of consequence. Please join me in welcoming Walter Robb.
So, Walter, we're thrilled to have you here. It's a real honor and privilege for all of us to have you here. Before I jump in, I want to give a special shout out to Lex and Ann Alexander. Neither one of us would be here without them. And so to give everyone in the room a little bit of a history lesson, Lex and Ann formed Wellspring Grocery in what is, well, now formerly the Magnolia Grill restaurant. And from there, it migrated to the location which is now known as Whole Foods on 9th Street, and there was an interim stop on the way that none of you would know about. When they were building the Wellspring Grocery business, they took a flyer on a kid and asked him to join their advisory board. And I was thrilled to accept that offer. They compensated me with an employee discount card, great food at every board meeting, and I got a chance to learn from people who were passionate about food and retailing, and it was an incredible learning experience. I was paid way too much. So we are thrilled to have them here because Wellspring was then acquired by Whole Foods, one of the very first acquisitions, I think the first acquisition for Whole Foods. And so it all starts right here in Durham. And so we're thrilled to have Walter back. And Walter, do you want to call attention to, we have some other distinguished guests with us as well.
Yeah, well, thanks everybody for having us today. And I'm here together with our regional leadership team, Omar Gay. Some of you met Omar's raised his hand, the president for the South region, and our team, Stephen, Amy, Joe, who else is here? Mark. So if you want a job or something like that, they're the ones to talk to. You got a problem with the stores, talk to them. If you like the stores, come talk to me. So, anyways, really happy to be here. We've had an awesome day here at the school. We've met a number of you at lunch and stuff, and it's been very welcoming, and it's very encouraging to see how excited all you are about business and the potential for business and what you're thinking about in terms of next steps, and we can amplify that a little bit later. But I wanted to add a word about Lex and Ann because they are at the very heart of Whole Foods, and what they brought to Whole Foods was much more than just the store or Wellspring stores. It was the love and appreciation for food and the quality of food and the stories behind food, and Lex in large measure contributed that to Whole Foods. I mean, to the extent that we're good at it, and Lex often says we still fall a little bit short of the Wellspring standard, but that all goes back to Lex. And so part of what, if you like Whole Foods, you like what Lex and Ann gave to us as a gift so many years ago. So Lex is one of my mentors and teachers, and I'm so happy to have both of them here today, so I'm glad you guys are here. Hey, a good story about Lex and Ann is, when they wanted to get into business, you guys are at this point in your life where you're trying to figure out what to do with your life. They decided they wanted to learn the food business, so they went out and volunteered at a co-op in San Diego or somewhere, LA or San Diego somewhere, for a year. And it's kind of a lesson in that. If there's something you want to do, then just go do it, and you'll figure it out what steps you have to take, and that's exactly what these two did, and then they built the wonderful company called Wellspring. So glad to have you guys here. And to their right, if you could just stand up, Chris, so people can see you. This is Chris Hitt, former president of Whole Foods Market for many years, called the Senator. We call him as his nickname, the Senator, but he actually led the team that created the Declaration of Interdependence for Whole Foods in 1985. Whole Foods was struggling in the early 80s, and it was Chris who came on to help the team sort itself out from a vision, mission, values perspective. And if you have a particular interest, if you've read that documents, interdependence is kind of a buzzword out there now, but in 85 it certainly wasn't, and it was Chris that really gave that gift to the company, which we still very much use today as our guiding principle. So, and I can tell you, Chris mentored me many times along the way, so an evening in a hotel room trying to work through something, and Chris, I'm very grateful that you're here today too, so thank you. Thanks, yeah.
Okay, let's jump in. So I have an advantage, which is you're a pretty public figure, and so there's a fair amount of material in terms of things that you've previously said.
Not as much as my partner, though.
Fair enough. So I'm gonna read you a quote from one of your previous interviews, which is as follows: "The power of business is the greatest possible change agent in the world." So I have a two-part question. Number one, why do you believe that? And then the second part is, what are you trying to change?
Okay, the easy questions first, right? So I believe that if you look around the life choices are individual, but what's amazing about business is that you can literally start something today and change it tomorrow. You can change form, you can take whatever path you want to take with business. If you look at the lawyers out there, with all due respect, it's a little dull, and in the pecking order, I think the business people are the ones that are ultimately guiding the lawyers as to what they're working on. Individual calling like doctors and so forth, that's all wonderful. But in business, you have an enterprise that has the ability to draw people in and create meaningful change in the world very quickly. And really, unless short of any regulations, there's really no rules on what you can focus on, what you can accomplish, how you can change shape or form. So if you look at a world that clearly has significant challenges and problems, as well as significant wonderful things, of course. I think about what institution could change and evolve to affect change. It's business. Whether it's small or large, it doesn't really matter. Scale often gets made a scapegoat. It really doesn't matter. It's not about the size of the business. It's about the ethics and about the values of the business and the purpose of the business. And so I think as an institution in society, it's the one that has the greatest potential to impact change. And I see it in terms of impacting individual lives in our company. We have actually 77,000 people work in Whole Foods now. And our turnover last year, by the way, was less than 10%, which is a fairly extraordinary number for a supermarket, which is normally about 100%. And so I think about all the stories that team members that I talk to of how their lives are changing as a result of their experience at working at the company. And that is very, very meaningful to hear those sorts of stories. So I think a business consciously put together creates extraordinary opportunity not only for the business, but for the individuals who work in the business. And what happens ultimately is individuals are growing, the business is growing, it starts working off each other, and the change just keeps happening.
So where did that passion come from?
I better turn this off, huh?
Well, you might get an important call, but so where does that passion come from? Is that something that happened to you over time as you became engaged, or did you see that opportunity to have real purpose in what you did through business from the very beginning?
Yeah, well, some of these folks who have known me for a while could answer that, but I think we were talking with some of you earlier about this juncture in your life where you haven't decided what you're going to do with your life, right? And you all saw the famous Steve Jobs quote about it's your life, so don't waste time following somebody else's dream. And you're at this juncture where you got to trust yourself to listen to what you really want to do. And I think for me, it was kind of a stumble bumble thing. I went to law school for 6 days, and I realized I was in the wrong place. Had all the books, I dropped out, and I just kept. This isn't right. This doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel right. And I just kept. I read a number of really good books in college, and I heard some speakers that really influenced me. Wendell Berry, Francis Moore Lepay, E.F. Schumacher. Albert Schweitzer was probably the most meaningful figure in my life because he was a guy that was a scholar in theology and religion, and is still probably the most accomplished musician of Bach organ, which is my favorite. But Schweitzer, at the age 30 years old, went back to medical school, completely upended his life because he was determined to build a hospital in Africa to help people. And I read that story. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in '66 or something like that. But for a guy that's willing to lay his life down on the line for what he believes or what he wants to do, that made a huge impression on me because it's easy to talk about things. It's another thing to put your life and say, that's what you're going to do. So for me, I don't know anything to do, any way to do things other than all out. And we talked to, I don't like the notion of balance in your life because I don't think it's worth a hill of beans. I think what's worth a hill of beans is a passionate, fulfilled life where you're doing something that you can feel the richness of it in every moment, and you want to keep doing it. And why settle for anything less? Why settle for anything less? Why not hold yourself accountable to that standard in your life of to be working as something that's really meaningful to yourself? And I see so many people struggle with this. Well, I can't do it, or somebody says I should do this or should do that, and I think the real standard that you got to hold yourself to is what is the answer inside of yourself with your life. You guys all have this incredible advantage of the education at Duke, and what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? And how are you going to hold yourself accountable to doing a passionate sort of life? And there's pragmatic things, your loans or whatever, all those things. I understand that stuff, but I would not settle for anything less than flat out full passion. And that's what the world needs. And that's what creates change, by the way. It's not the lukewarm stuff that motivates people. And it's not your lectures to them about this or that. What motivates them is seeing a passionate individual engaged in something. That's what inspires people to change themselves. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but there you have it.
So at the same time that you're talking about this passion for what you do and the power of business as a change agent, you're also saying that there are people out there giving business a bad name. And in fact, you're not the only one saying that it is certainly true that there is a crisis of leadership in terms of not just political leaders, which we're like to pick on, but business leaders as well. And why is it that at the same time that there's this amazing opportunity, you see people shooting themselves in the foot?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think first of all, business has done a lot of that themselves through their bad behavior. I mean, you don't have to look very far back in history to see Enron or WorldCom or flat out lack of integrity, or in business that sets a very bad example. And there's just built up this kind of narrative in the media that the business tycoons or the CEOs, we heard it a lot, frankly, in the 2008, in the first term of the president. I'm going to stick my foot on the neck of CEOs. And who are you talking about? This sort of narrative that just gets it, that all business people are out there raping and pillaging, and frankly, so I think it's a combination of bad business behavior. To some extent, the media picks up on that and extends it to all business folks. And then also, I think business itself not generating, creating, aspiring to a higher sense of purpose for itself. And my partner, John's new book, Conscious Capitalism, I hope you guys will pick one up and read it, is kind of tries to lay out a way of thinking about business that might be helpful. It's got 4 basic principles, which is that business should be about a deeper purpose or mission, the why you're in business, right? That business should ascribe to a wider circle of stakeholders, that a business is part of a larger ecosystem, then a business has responsibility to all the participants in the ecosystem and should think about maximizing value for all the stakeholders, and certainly not just for the shareholder stakeholder. that there's got to be conscious leadership. There's got to be, I've learned this for sure, that you can only lead a business so far as you've developed yourself personally. If you're, you can't take a business any further than you've been able to grow yourself. And then I learned a lot of that from the senator. And then conscious culture. The culture may be the most underappreciated aspect of business, conscious business, and because it's really mission and values practiced over time is what a culture is. It's how we do it around here. It's where the people live in the business. And so our suggestion is there's lots of other entrepreneurs out there talking about new forms of capitalism, whether it's Richard Branson with enlightened capitalism or Bill Gates with creative capitalism or Al Gore's getting in the act now with sustainable capitalism. But I think business itself has to ascribe to a higher set of ideals for operating, and in doing so, start to change the narrative about what business represents.
So one of the comments.
I'll just say one more thing. I've had an intensely personal experience with business. All right, and I started out at 21 years old, where I borrowed $10,000 from my stepfather to start a little store. Okay, 1977, from scratch, with nothing, with no business experience, and because my father wouldn't give me the money, my stepfather wrote me a check and said, "Here." And I did it, and I had to scrap and learn, and no one gave me anything, even though I had a great education, and I've seen firsthand what, if you will stay with it, what you learn through business and what you can gain through business. And my son-in-law now has started a little coffee cart business, and I'm watching the story unfold before my eyes of somebody who will take nothing, scrap work, and so I've seen the transformational power of business up close and personal, and it's been my experience that anything is possible if you are willing to, commit to it. So, yeah.
So one of the things that you have said in kind of observing this bad behavior that we do see all too often, you've asked the question aloud, where is their ethical compass? And my question to you is, where did your ethical compass come from?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it comes from within. It comes from, when you talk about ethical compass or values, you're talking about things that should be deeply held beliefs or deeply held internal beliefs that guide your behavior and your decisions. I mean, core values are something that you should be developing for yourselves right now. These are not things that change. These are things that you believe to be true about the world and you use to guide yourself. And companies can have those things too, and often do, although they don't always practice them right. So I remember when I was in college, I had this religious studies class, and I had a teacher named Jerry Irish who, the final exam was a take-home exam, and he said, here's the exam. He gave me the paper. He said, the final exam was this question: drawing in all the readings of the class, that makes the professors happy, right? Who are you, and in what or whom do you find guidance for the conduct of your life? That was the final exam. So, that sort of a question makes you dig deep about what you believe. And so I think first of all, people have to go on their path to find that compass, and they're going to use it. But a lot of companies just have lost their way. Either they're all about the money, or they're for whatever reason, there's lots of temptations out there constantly to do this or do that. And I think it's will, it's integrity, it's those sorts of qualities, character. That you have to kind of find. I mean, you're not a business person apart from being a person. You're a person and a business person. They go together, and I don't know why people separate those. So the same qualities that you have as a person, you're going to bring as your qualities of leadership and to the business. And so, I mean, I think Whole Foods, we have things we believe, and we don't always get it right, but we're trying our best to pursue those.
So one of your personal qualities is that you don't accept limits. I mean, what was this thing you said, that if you tell me I can't do something, that's a red flag in front of me and I'm going to go do it. And in response to a question about trade-offs, you said, I don't want to hear about trade-offs. And so you basically take the view that I can do something brand new that's going to change the way we look at things. For someone with that kind of view of the world, it's probably not surprising that you simultaneously hold beliefs that seem irreconcilable. So let me give you an example. So one of the things that you said in a previous interview is that the economic crisis exposed the limits of free market capitalism. In another interview, you talked about how one of your heroes is Milton Friedman, who is probably the world's biggest advocate of free market capitalism.
That's John's hero, actually, not mine.
Oh, so he's not yours.
Yeah. But we had dinner with him, John and I, myself, and it was very interesting. I mean, Milton's a great guy, but I wouldn't describe him as one of my heroes. He is one of John's heroes, though.
Okay.
Does that kind of mess your question up?
It does. Please, just play along. So we'll simplify what would have been really fascinating. So tell me, I mean, so you've also said business will be fine if we don't get too much regulation. So maybe that's another version of that. But tell me, what are the limits of free market capitalism that have been exposed?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think that's a very big question, right? I mean, it's interesting. John's a libertarian and I'm a Democrat. And so we have some very interesting conversations about all of this. But I think what I mean is that the downturn, which was did expose that there's some places where I don't know that we're necessarily in a pure free market now anymore, as I think the regulation is fairly it continues to grow, and some of that grows, by the way, because of the distrust of business. If we can't trust business to do the right thing, we got to regulate them. But some of the regulations are simply onerous, and some are simply ridiculous. Sarbanes-Oxley, for example, costs us a boatload of money every year. It's way beyond what's necessary to do the achieved effect. And it's counterproductive economically to invest resources in that sort of direction. I could give you certain states, the processes to get a business entitled or whatever, way beyond what's necessary. I don't even think they know what the other person is doing, and that's counterproductive. But look, I mean, I think the question of, we could go to healthcare if you want to dive into something that's just, there's got to be, clearly we're at a place where, even though Whole Foods provides healthcare to all of our team members, and I'm not sure people realize that, but there was a place where a lot of people were without healthcare. There's a real crisis, and in this civil society, there's a moral question about how you address those sorts of things. And I think that, at least up to that point, free market capitalism had not addressed that particular human condition. And I don't know how you move forward if you don't try to address it for all people, not just some people. So I think you also saw the fact that many businesses were very greedy, particularly whether it was lending practices that were borderline ethical, or some of the derivatives, or some of the behavior that we're seeing, insider trading. I mean, really, all these people are doing all these sorts of things, right? And the government, by the way, is not without fault in this. I mean, you've read John Allison's book, and I would urge you guys all to read that book. He was at BB&T, wrote a book on free market capitalism. It's a very good book.
And a Fuqua graduate.
And a Fuqua graduate, yeah. I was going to say that, right? Yeah. So I think. Listen, I'm an unabashed supporter of business. I really love business, and I think capitalism is the greatest economic system ever devised in terms of creating wealth and progress for humankind. There's not anything even close to that. But what's needed is a capitalism that's playing to a higher set of values, morals, in some way taking more of the responsibility to itself to deal with a wider circle of stakeholders in order to create the sort of progress that we need to make right now in the 21st century. And it has to be human progress. It has to be touching human lives, and it can't be indifferent to that sort of division that we have in this country right now, the type of suffering that's out there right now. And but on the other hand, I think if business trains on some of those problems, I'll give you an example. The one that I'm particularly passionate about, having done this most of my life, is that there's millions of people in this country who do not have access to fresh, healthy food. Right? There's many underserved communities in the United States. So you can look on the USDA map, and so why isn't that something that we could do something about? Why is that something we have to just accept? And so we're starting a new foundation called the Whole Cities Foundation, whose purpose it is to aid and abet in that effort, which is to broaden access. And we're going to build stores, and some of the stores we build are going to be 100% of the profits are going to go back to the community. So there's an example of not only business stepping into a problem, it's also an example of the lines blurring between a profit and a nonprofit, and in order to serve the needs of people.
So you're articulating a big difference between a shareholder view of the world and a stakeholder view of the world.
You want to talk about Milton Friedman, right? Yeah.
So we're back to Milton Friedman, yes, but we'll go beyond him. So the interesting thing is that if we look at Whole Foods, it very much lives up to the philosophy that there are a variety of stakeholders of critical importance, and it's not just the shareholder, but you care deeply about your customers, your employees, your vendors, your community, the environment. And Whole Foods is an award-winning company as people measure every little thing about environmental impact and community impact and employee impact and so on. And so you've been recognized as a great company, and that must be a tremendous source of pride. It also puts a target on your back. So how do you deal with the situations where people are telling you, well, you care about the employees, but apparently you don't care enough. You're not giving them enough. Or you care about the community, but you don't care enough, and so on and so forth, because you're always visible and therefore a real target.
Yeah, I mean, we have 8 lawyers, full-time lawyers now. We never had any lawyers before, so we get sued a bunch of times a day too. But I'm just going to bring the lawyers back in. But how do you deal with it? I mean, you take from those sorts of criticisms that you get, you try to listen responsibly and take the nuggets where there's something that's real or true. You try to hear it and do something with it. And the rest you have to let wash off your back, because not everybody sees the world the same way. And if you're sure that you're aiming towards something worthwhile, and then you just keep on keeping on. Because, I mean, with, for example, Wall Street, we talked earlier this morning, they're never happy. It doesn't matter what you do, they always want more. If if you're growing faster, they want more profits. If you're making more profits, they want more growth. They're never happy. So you realize that you just constantly, they have a legitimate interest in the business, but you cannot run your business just to try to satisfy them, because you'll never satisfy them. You drive yourself crazy. So the best example of what you're saying is that in 2007 or 8, Michael Pollan wrote a book called Omnivore's Dilemma, in which he really skewered us. Some fair, some not fair, in my view. As someone who kind of came to the food movement pretty late in his life, compared to those of us who'd been doing it for a long time, and it took everything we had just to get to this point. But his comments were about we had kind of lost our connection to local producers, and on that he was right. And that the marketing and so forth we were doing was not exactly on point. And so we took a look at that and then went back to work on that, and I think shifted to where I think our reputation now is much stronger with respect to the local producer community all around the country. And we started an investment equity program and also a local loan program, which we've now loaned out $8 million, some of it right here in North Carolina. So, and I think our reputation is, and we took the feedback that was legitimate and we tried to improve. So the day that you stop listening to feedback is a sad day, because you're not going to continue to improve. But you can't, you recognize that not everything you hear about criticism, it's not all right, first of all. And then you'd be chasing that forever if you did that.
So in terms of coming back to your ethical compass, how do you say no to these various stakeholders? What have you gone through that makes you comfortable saying, I'm going to have to say no this time. I'm not going to give you the healthcare package that you would want. I'm not going to give back to the community in the fashion that you would want, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Well, everybody always wants more. And you only have so many resources, and so I think the one that comes up a lot for me in what you're saying there is the healthcare. Healthcare costs have been rising anywhere from 3 to 10% a year. That's just medical care costs, and we have a large, and we're self-insured, and so every year we're facing this question of how much gets passed on to team members and how much will the company absorb. And we have our team members by far get the most percentage of the dollar that we earn at the register. We get $1 through the register. We're spending 24 cents on our team members all in, which is, if you compare that to any other supermarket company, is far greater percentage. I mean, our investors only make 3 pennies on the bottom, so the team members get by far the lion's share of the spend. But this decision of balancing of team members would always like more money. If we gave every team member a $1 an hour raise, that would take all of our profits, and that's not a good thing because then we don't have the money to grow. So I think you try to explain it in those terms that we need some of this to keep the company growing. But particularly this healthcare question, we faced it a lot over the last couple of years. John came up with a brilliant idea a few years back, which is that we're going to have everybody vote on the benefit package. So I think in 2007, we started this idea of every couple of years letting team members, we put the ballot choices up there and let them all vote. And this last time we had over 50,000 team members vote on their benefits package, which I think is fairly extraordinary for a large company. But you take it inside and you try to gnash it through and figure out what is the best thing, knowing that you can't do everything for everybody, and make the best decision that you can. We do use the word balancing because sometimes you're over here a little more on the team member side, sometimes you're over here on the customer side. But when you talked earlier about I don't like trade-offs, because I think trade-offs is a very limiting word. I would rather figure out a solution that looks at two situations and creates something where both parties win. That's higher level thinking. It's higher level synthesis of reality to create those sort of solutions, and that's what we're striving. That's what we're striving to do. We don't always get there, but so.
Okay, let's talk about love and fear. So you are interesting in that you're not afraid to use the love word in talking about your company, and you're also not afraid to admit to fear. So tell us about those two words and how you deal with them.
Is this interesting to you guys? Well, again, back to this sort of thing of all of your people, business people are people, and in my experience, growing as a person, as leader, I hit this, I've always been a type A driven and learning the retail thing. But I remember as you grow, particularly as you get older, you learn, particularly as you become a father, and now I'm a grandfather, you learn the power of love, and so you're developing your abilities as an operator, but you're also developing your abilities as a human being, your awareness. And so, look, there's no more powerful force in the world than love. Think about it. I told you the story today earlier where I had a long day and I got a message on my phone from my granddaughter saying, "Hi, Bappa, I love you," and I completely just melted. That's the power of love, and it's not love in the base sense, but love in the sense of the caring and affection for another person or for a team or for what you're working on together. That is what moves people, the genuineness of that. And fear, on the other hand, is a thing when you feel it, and everybody feels it. It's normal and natural to feel it, right? Everybody has fears. But what happens when you get feared is you start to contract. You start to draw in. You start to become smaller into a ball to protect yourself. You start thinking about protecting yourself. And that's very different than the expansiveness of love and care and affection, right? So when you hit a point in your life, sometimes you usually have a choice of whether you're going to go into the fear space or whether you're going to just tough it through and go into the love space. And for the sake of the business, again, to the extent that you can hit those points and expand rather than contract, the business will continue to be able to grow, and you'll be able to create more opportunity for others. And empowerment is a wonderful word because you all know that word empowerment. It gets a little bit overused, but a lot of people use it in the sense of taking the power for themselves, right? I'm going to empower myself. I'm an empowered individual. But the true power in that word is actually giving the power away when you empower somebody else. Do you know how powerful it is for you to say, if I said, Omar, I believe in you, which I did. Omar, we'd like you to be the regional president for the South region. Do you know what that means to somebody when they're given that sort of empowerment? So empowerment, love, these are powerful forces. And it's sort of like the idea that business is separate from human life. But no, it's human life and business all together. And those are very powerful things that can be involved as your leaders in particular to care for people in that way. So you said earlier that one of the things that you think makes Whole Foods very successful is that the leaders and everybody in the company it's okay to be vulnerable and to show that vulnerability. So
as the CEO, is it okay for you to show your fear? Because there are all kinds of people who tell you, well, as the CEO, never let them see you sweat, never show any fear, worry, concern.
Yep.
Is that okay for you?
I think not only is it okay, I think it's essential. Because if you can't show the vulnerability, it's very hard for others in leadership position to feel like it's okay to do that. And so it has to be genuine and authentic. You can't, I'm going to go up there and be vulnerable now. That people see right through that. But yeah, no, I think it's a very powerful. You know, those moments where something real is shared, and that's gives people encouragement and permission, if you will, to be that way themselves. And that's when real connections happen between people. You know, and so I think it's a very important. It takes a certain degree of self-awareness and self-confidence to get to the place where you're willing to do that. I mean, I wouldn't go to Wall Street and break down and sob or something like that, right? I mean, that's not appropriate there a lot of times. But if, you know, we have a new thing we started called the Academy for Conscious Leadership, which we started to be able to reinvigorate the discussion around leading with values. And we're rotating all of our store team leaders, store managers through that. And I do speak at that. And I speak strictly from the heart, and I share experiences where I hit rock bottom and came back, and I think that's you know, that's real. Stuff happens. You don't grow unless you have those experiences and you meet them and you go through them. And so I think it's an essential part of leadership, real leadership.
Okay, 2 more quick questions, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience. So, first question. You have said that you are a missionary who retails rather than a retailer on a mission.
Okay.
And so your advice to all of these people who are about to embark on their own mission, should they be missionaries? Is that, when you talk about passion and so on, is that what you mean?
It is what I mean. I think that I would like to encourage you all to listen to yourself inside. I think there's a path for each one of you that's uniquely yours, and I want you to find that sense of mission and purpose with your life. And you've got this extraordinary gift of the education here, but that's not a substitute for you doing the work inside yourself and finding out what you want to do. And retailing for us, I mean, retailing. I never grew up in a retailing family or anything. I've learned it, pretty good at it, but really I came to the retailing because I thought it was a place where I could bring natural foods to the world, and it happened to be the stores was the way that we could do that, but it was the deeper sense of mission and purpose. So that's why I say it's not the retailing that comes first. The retail is the expression, it's the canvas that we paint the values and the mission and the purpose on. The stores are an expression of something much deeper. They're the visible manifestation of it, but what's behind that is the sort of burning desire to bring healthier food to the world and to heal the world, and that's what drives Whole Foods at the core of it. And I want that for you. And it's what's so encouraging talking to so many of you this morning is that I see that light burning inside of you too. And you're at that point in your life where it's just, you have an opportunity to shape a life for yourself that is built on purpose and passion. And I hope that you will do that. I hope you will not shrink back from that. I hope you will hold yourself to that possibility because it's immensely rewarding. And you know, at Whole Foods, we're 32 years old now. We'll hit $13 billion in sales, market cap of $18 billion, which is now, by the way, larger than the combined market cap of Safeway, Albertsons, and Kroger altogether, which is fairly extraordinary for us. And all kind of, you know, Lex and Chris played a key part along the way, helping the company to get where it is now. And we never expected it all to be at this place where we are. So wonderful things happen when you dig deep and find that. So I hope that what happens for all of you. Maybe some of you will come join us in Whole Foods.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
So my last question, which is, I'm going to flip around the question that you asked everyone at lunch today, which is optimist or pessimist, and what is the one word that you use to guide your thinking? So I'm endlessly optimistic because I believe in human potential and I believe in business, and we've talked about that, why that's the case. And then my word is this year, I told you I have a word every year. This year I actually have 3 words, but you asked for 1 word, so I'll give you 1 word, which is courage. And this came because I lost my mom last summer, and I was
in the 5 days that we sat with her in the last days between life and death, and there is a world between the two, which is very different than the world we're in every day doing our stuff. I had a chance to really think, and I talked to her for a couple of days, and then she was not there for 3 days. But her life was all about courage. She never backed down. And when I thought about her life in those days, that's the word that rose up for me. And I thought about, wow, I've got to dig down and find more of that myself, not only for myself, but also for our company. We have to be willing to push into areas that are scary or areas of possibility. We got to find more courage and to do more and do more. I mean, ultimately, it's the substance of things. What are you doing? Are you doing something that's meaningful? Are you spending your time on things that matter and that are meaningful and are creating substance in the world? Are you spending your time on those things? And for me, I want to see us, and I want to see all of us, find more courage. Which doesn't mean you're not afraid, as we talked about at lunch, because everybody has fear, but courage is that wonderful quality of heart that allows you to push through and do it anyways. And then when you do it, you realize, wow, I can do that, right? I got on the other side of it. You feel pretty good about what you accomplished. So dream big. Dream big, have big dreams. Don't be a bystander, don't be a whiner, don't be a complainer. Dream big and set big goals for yourself, and then constantly hold yourself accountable to that. And that's what I'm saying to myself this year is that how do I stretch further? How do I reach higher? How do I make sure that we are going at things that really matter in the world? And so there you have it.
Okay. All right. Questions from the audience? Is there a microphone here? So.
It's a nice suit you got on there.
Okay, I want you to get a microphone. Could you give Lex the microphone, please?
I just want to say that I was a terrible student, so I could never get into business school, but I've spent a lot of time in this kind of discussion in both the UNC and the Duke Business School, because if you own a grocery store in town, you tend to meet a lot of people. And so I was asked to come and speak in a lot of classes. And one of the things I've come to believe is it's hard to think up a business. It's much easier to feel a business, which is similar to what Walter's saying. You have to feel inside of you the need for this business, and then you have the passion for it. But if you just think it up, I think that's a whole lot harder. And I used to tell my employees that the least they could do is figure out what in the world they loved or what lit them up, and the most they could do is build their life around that thing. So,
Well said, Lex.
I did want to say one other thing about this love thing, because there is a mechanism that Whole Foods uses that I think is very successful in making people feel vulnerable.
You want me to talk about the appreciations? Or? So one little thing, Lex is making the point that there are things in the Whole Foods culture which support the idea of love being present, and that is at the end of every meeting, we do a little thing called appreciations, where we take a moment to, not everybody has to do an appreciation, but it's a moment where you just express gratitude for your coworker or somebody in the team, and for what they've accomplished, what they've contributed, something that they've done, and it's a wonderful moment there.
I think that also helps the meetings face the harder issues and be more honest, because you know that there's the wrap-up with.
He's saying that it creates the space, it helps the space to be a little more open, because you know you're going to come back at the end and tie it back off. And I remember an early Whole Foods meeting, quite frankly, where first time I went to a Whole Foods leadership meeting, it was so much conflict that and I'm such a sensitive person, I actually left there crying. I had to go talk to Chris, had talked me out of the trees, because I had never seen people go at each other like this, and it was just foreign to me. And I've learned now the power of that in a constructive way, that's actually how you surface stuff. If you don't do that, you're not going to get at that stuff. You're not going to move the company forward. It's actually in some way, we learned this, the conflict between stakeholders, your willingness to embrace the conflict is what surfaces the stuff that you need to work on, right? So you made the point that it's actually a gift when they give you this feedback, because you can look at something in a way that you wouldn't in the normal course of business. And you got to be willing to do it. And it's hard. It hurts sometimes, right? But but good stuff surfaces when you do that. So, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so first off, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not going to hold it against you. My wonderful husband goes to business school here, and I have a question regarding the
Should I touch
students
that, or
here.
I'll just leave it? I'll just leave that.
As business school students, he'll mostly be working for large multi-million-dollar and multi-billion-dollar companies and corporations upon graduation. How do you reconcile this idea of having purpose and laying your life on the line for a passion with working to make these huge companies and corporations more money? And then secondly, what advice do you have for these students who feel that who want to feel that they are giving back and making a positive contribution to the world, given their work at these huge, huge companies?
Yeah. Well, I think you can, wherever you are, wherever you're working, you can start where you are and be an agent of change. So, I mean, you can't take Whole Foods and take it to Exxon or something. That just would never work. But what you can do is start at Exxon, wherever you are, and start creating some sort of community or whatever you want to do in whatever company you're working in. But you're basically saying, how do we reconcile making money and being a large company? Is that sort of the first question?
Well, reconciling making these students, making these companies even more money, and then also but having a purpose and giving back, and
Well, there's nothing wrong with making money. I mean, it's not the making money that's wrong. We have to make money if you're going to grow the company, if you're going to grow it, and you're going to create more opportunity and jobs. You've got to be profitable, otherwise you're not going to get funded, right? So there's nothing inherently wrong. It's more like how you conduct yourself and what you do with the profits, and how balanced are the profits. I mean, give you one example at Whole Foods. In the average corporation in America, the rate of executive pay to worker pay is 450 times. At Whole Foods, there's a cap at 19 times. It's a hard cap. So we've got a relational equity there, which balances internal equity and external equity in terms of, and I think that helps to keep faith with folks in the company about how we're conducting ourselves. So yes, we're making profits, but it's not going so that I or Omar can get the big fat salary. And I fly Southwest, right? So Omar flies Southwest. I don't know, you fly Southwest? Delta. Delta, all right. So he's got the better deal, I can assure you that. But I always get the linebacker sitting next to me. But I think, I think this is part of changing the view of all this, is that, and this is the problem that nonprofit organizations have a real problem, is they never make any money, and they're not sustainable, and they're constantly having to scrap for dough, and it's kind of unseemly a lot of times. Come on, figure out some way to support yourself to be able, because your idealism is fantastic. But I don't know, I think there's a lot in your question, and I think I don't really see it as reconciling. I see, we don't exist to make money. The example that John used the other day I thought was very good. My body, I have to make red blood cells in order to live, but I don't exist to make red blood cells, right? So we're not here to we're not operating a company to make money. We're here to create a difference in the world and to create and I said, like a workplace based on love and respect. And that's not just a part two. That's a very important part of Whole Foods, is the idea that you can create a different sort of workplace. And again, Chris had a lot of influence in shaping all that, but it matters as much how you do something as what you do. And I actually think what needs to happen at this time in history is larger companies, all companies, need to start functioning at a higher consciousness level in order to show the true potential of business and create the change. And so why don't we talk about these things about money? Why don't we start doing this? There's nothing wrong with money. There's nothing wrong with profits. What's wrong is when they're out of balance. What's wrong is when it's all about the shareholder and not about the team members. Those are the things that need to be corrected. And that's up to business to do that. That's up to business. It's up to you guys to leave here with your natural sense of there's a natural sense here of these things, that you go out there and create businesses that are organized in that fashion, that the shareholder is not our most important stakeholder. The customer is, and team member, those two are the most important thing to Whole Foods. And again, do we always get that right? No, but is that what we're striving for? Yes. So that's what needs to happen now. We need to dive into this conversation. Business needs to evolve to function in a different way. And we need to stop thinking about profit as an evil thing or an ugly thing. It's a beautiful thing. It comes as a result of aiming at a higher thing, and then the profits come, right? I mean, you think Whole Foods is a large company. We only made $325 million last year as a whole company. That's less than 3% of our top line. So it's still a significant amount of money, but it's in balance, I think, with all the other. We invested, we gave over $50 million away into the various communities around the United States. And the second part of your question, I think we have 3 foundations now at the company, and people are coming to work at the company because they can see that in addition to operating our stores, they can participate in these foundations. Whole Planet Foundation is working to end poverty in the developing world through microfinance, partnership with Muhammad Yunus. Whole Kids Foundation is working to improve kids' nutrition through school districts, salad bars, gardens. And increasingly our team members are volunteering. They're voluntarily contributing, a third of them are contributing through their paycheck deduct to support the foundations. And I think having those sorts of activities part of what the company's doing allows you to keep your ideals and values intact when you're doing the work. And if you don't feel that when you're in a company, you're probably in the wrong place. You need to move. So
Walter, Senator, what I would say to you, which Walter said earlier, is the challenge you're putting on the table. Many of you, probably all of you, have taken out a lot of loans to be able to be here. And therefore, the challenge you're facing is how do you pay that back? And therefore, you need a good paying job. So go to the company that you have the best fit with. That makes it the easiest choice. The courageous choice is go to a company that will pay you well, but also you'd like to change by being there. Either one will work. The big business that most of the world knows today is not Whole Foods. And I do encourage you to look at John's book. There's several companies that are discussed in that book. Try to work for those companies.
I mean, a lot of you at lunch were talking about you're going into management consulting, and I said, what are you consulting on? You haven't actually managed anything yet, but I don't know. But I think that's fine. Look, there's no judgment here about this. It's really ultimately you guys crafting your own life. But if you have to pay back the loans, you have to do what you have to do. But you got to live too. You got to be alive. You got to be part of this thing that's happening here. And food is our thing, but your thing may be something different. I've just met some of the MD students that you got this incredible skill set, and you should deploy it in a way that not only is fulfilling, but also takes care of your bills. There's not a lot of jobs out there right now, but there's a lot of work to do, right? Become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, first off, I just want to thank you again for coming today. It's been very informative. But also I want to ask, what tough...
Informative, that sounds boring.
Engaging as well, excuse me.
Better, okay, good.
I'm curious what tough decision or decision you had to make this year, and how do you decide you or your co-CEO, who would make that?
Draw straws? We're trying to explain the co-CEO thing to some other folks earlier today. I mean, remember, John and I have been friends for a long time, and we had a 5-person executive team for 10 years that essentially we pay ourselves all the same. So there's a context for that of a relationship and that goes back a way. So we don't struggle with those sorts of things. And John's the co-founder of the company, so he's got a certain role in the company that no one else will ever have, right? And I respect that. So. That being said, I've been president and chief operating officer for 10 years before I became CEO. So I, in some ways, I was running parts of the company for a while, and John was thinking, big picture down the road, that sort of thing. So there was kind of a natural break in that respect. But I think in any big decision for Whole Foods, we all engage, not only just the 5 of us, but the whole senior leadership team, of which Omar is a part as well. Tough decisions are usually people. I had to make a change at one of the executive spots this year, and you try to do that with compassion, but when you can see that somebody just cannot get to the next level and it's holding the company back, then you have to dive in and do that. And that was a tough one this year, the change that we had to make, and to do it in a way that's humane and compassionate, but is ultimately the right thing for the business. That's what we're called to do as leaders, is to make the right decisions to allow the company to continue to flourish. If we don't make those decisions, it holds the company back. So those are always tough ones. I think also some of the healthcare decisions that we talked about earlier, how much of the dollars get to the team members and how much is the company going to pick up? And you know, it's more than just moving the dollars from A to B. It's also an act of faith or connection with team members who are watching your actions to see if you're actually lining up with your values and what they understand the values to be. And that particular one 2 years ago, I remember Omar and I were talking about this last night, is we made a decision as an executive team to do, I was in the minority on the decision, but we made a decision to allocate a certain percentage back to the team members and raise their things. And I could not sleep. I woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning and I wrote John an email and I said, this is wrong. This is not the right decision. And he woke up at 4 and he said, you know what, I'm glad you thought about this. I agree. And we did a 360 and went where the company took all of the premiums that year because we'd had such a good year as a company. There's no way the team members would understand the stock up 30% and then we're going to hit them with more charges. It just seemed like their hard work, they got us there. So we, you know, those types of decisions, you just battle it out, you grist it out, and there's no perfect decision, and you try to think of all the stakeholders, and you try to think about what's the best way of including all of them in the decision. So those are two that come to mind. Is that, yeah. There's no, there's not a magic formula. There's only your values and your principles that you use. And when I go into a decision like that, I'm trying to think, what's the best way to stay true to the values and honor the stakeholders? And if you use that screen for making your decisions, you're usually going to make a pretty good one. So
there's probably nothing more crushing in this country right now, whether it's business or in the larger society, than the failure of our medical system. The cost overruns that go on in that are just so egregious. And Whole Foods turning to their team members and saying, this is how much money we can spend right now. Tell us what's most important to you for us to spend it on, is the first step. And actually the efforts Whole Foods is trying to make to alter the health consciousness of those 77,000 people, never mind our customers, is going to be something that hopefully will begin to change this failure in the U.S. culture.
yeah. Just from pure economics, Chris is talking about the healthcare system. We're spending close to $3 trillion on healthcare, and it's almost 20% of the GDP. It's a misallocation of capital and resources the way it's currently constituted, and yet there's a real human need there, right? And that's a whole conversation that we didn't really go into. But
so luckily, there are a large number of students out there who are going to make changes there that will improve our lives around healthcare.
Okay, that's good then.
Am I wrong?
No, I mean, there's just there's no silver bullet on this. There's strictly more individual responsibility around diet, and no one's going to figure out something. You know, 80% of this spend is on lifestyle diseases, and the answer is right in front of your eyes. And you got to work on your diet. You got to improve your diet. If you take that, you're going to start to move in the right direction, and that's what we've been trying to do with some of the programs that Chris is talking about. And that's an example. Companies are doing it different ways, but you know, we incentivize we provide testing once a year for 4 basic metrics, and it's voluntary. You don't have to participate, but if you do, you can get escalating discounts. We provide immersion experiences with medical doctors for a week. We'll pay for you and your spouse to go to that. And I've seen, I've had letters from team members, they lose 60, 70 pounds, get their blood pressure in check, get off their meds, life-changing experiences. You don't think that when they finish that, they feel good about Whole Foods and working at Whole Foods. And so, I mean, back to your kind of question earlier, I think when a company invests in its team members in those sorts of ways, I think it creates loyalty and creates a place where people want to come to work. So there was something I was going to say, and I forgot what it was, so come back to me. Come on now, you guys. So I'm going to start asking you how you're doing out there. So
about your other 2 words.
Oh, the other 2 words. Yeah, for this year they are for me humility and confidence. And humility in this sense that when you start to enjoy a certain level of success, there's always a temptation to go to the ego about that. And the ego is a dead end. It's a dead end. I can tell you from experience. And the way you can check that is in any moment you can be checking your motivations for what you're doing. And if your motivations are to enhance yourself or your reputation or something, then that's going to stop at some point. And so for the company, not only for me individually as a leader, but also for the company to stay focused on what we're here to do and for the right reasons. And I like that word because I think all great leaders have humility in some way, shape, or form. And confidence because to be courageous, you got to have some confidence to go and do it. You got to believe that you can make change happen, right? If the change was supposed to happen, it would have already happened, right? It's waiting for somebody to spark it up and go. So you need the confidence to not arrogance. Arrogance is unacceptable. Arrogance is a total turnoff. But confidence in the right sense is wonderful. So those are my 3 words for this year. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much, Walter, for your time, and thank you also to your senior management here today. You've really given us a lot to think about. Please join me in a round of applause.
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.